This episode of CFO Thought Leader is made possible by Planful and Avalara. This episode of CFO Thought Leader is made possible by Planful and Avalara. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a holiday bonus episode. This is Jack Sweeney, your host of CFO Thought Leader. We hope you're enjoying your Labor Day holiday, wherever you may be. Bonus episodes are where we share with you some of the moments of insight our finance leader guests have shared with us over time. However, this holiday episode is perhaps a little different. The three finance leader stories we'd like to share with you have to do with their beginnings, their early beginnings, before they knew what debits and credits even were. We're going to shed some light on the younger days of these three CFOs, and along the way, attempt to reveal something about fatherhood, motherhood, and life in these United States. That's a tall order. Our first finance leader story belongs to Scott Healy, who joined us back on episode 901 in May of 2023. CFO Healy began his professional life at Arthur Andersen back in the early 1980s. He ascended into the senior ranks of a number of notable energy companies. Along the way, he received a number of CFO appointments, the latest being with Forterra, a technology company dedicated to the production of low-carbon cement. It's a wonderful episode. Again, it's 901. But there was one story that Scott shared that, more than others perhaps, has continued to keep his episode top of mind for us. Here's what Scott shared.
So I would say I had a very interesting childhood where I had two very big influences on my life. I was very close to my father, and my father was a tough as nails Air Force colonel. If you've ever seen The Great Santini, which is a movie on a Marine colonel, my father was a little milder version of that. And I had a deaf brother who I got inspired by all the things he had to face in life. And so if you ask me on a personal habit that I'm used to, that I'd be known for, is my father instilled in me very early a belief in trying. My father would not let me use the word can't. If I used the word can't, he would always say the same line, which is, hey, you can always try and you'll be amazed about what you accomplish. And early on in my life, my father made sure I tried. So in kindergarten, I did not like coloring or painting or any of those things. And I was close to failing out. And I just didn't do the work. And my father came to me and said, you realize that if you don't start trying, you're going to have to be in kindergarten for the rest of your life, coloring and doing things you hate. And I said, oh, my, yeah, that's a good point. I don't want to do that. And so I started trying. And then academically, turns out I was very good in math. And my father said, you really should show me you can do something other than math. And so he came to me and said, in the second grade and third grade, I want you to read 50 books. And I want you to write 50 book reports. And I said, well, that seems reasonable. I had no idea how much that was. And I did that. And I don't think any student in the class was closer than 25 in any individual year. But that's just sort of how my dad thought. And he didn't stop there. So, for instance, when we lived on a military base, we had a football field behind us that was open space, that was lawn. And my dad woke up one day and said to my brother and I, said, you guys need to go cut that. And he gave us a lawnmower that had no grass catch. And we had to rake. Now, if you've ever tried to do that, what you end up knowing quickly is you better organize your effort or you're going to be there all day. And similarly, when my father said, hey, have you done enough for other people? He started loaning me out to people to do work for them that couldn't, like, for example, cleaning their pools or cutting their lawn, that they couldn't do it themselves. So it really instilled this sort of spirit of trying. And it even got to negotiation. So for Christmas at the age of 8, my father came to me and said, you got to negotiate for your Christmas gifts. There wasn't anything about Santa. So I had to produce a list of gifts with the prices, which we went back and forth. And fortunately, I was a good negotiator then, and I got what I wanted. But it really instilled in me a sense of doing things. And I carried from that really a joy in the process, which really in the whole idea of trying. And when you have that, you stop thinking about what other people are saying, and you stop really just getting focused on what do I need to do next? And that's where my brother came in. So my brother was completely deaf. He was older than me. My brother went to school at 1.5 to learn how to read lips. He used to carry around a red dictionary. When people would say words he didn't know, he'd ask them. When people would stare at him in restaurants, he'd go over and introduce himself. And I can remember 2 things specifically to him that really inspired me in my life. So we moved to California so my brother could go to Burlingame High School. And my father goes, which had a deaf program, my father goes to the principal and says, I want my son to graduate in 3 years. Principal looks at him and said, that's impossible. The deaf program's 5 years, and the only deaf students graduated faster than that is 4 years. It's just never going to happen. And I can remember to this day, because I could see it in my father's face. He looked at that principal and said, you don't know my son. And my brother graduated in 3, went on to graduate in 5 years from Northridge State, getting both his bachelor and master's, and then even more, and talk about trying. So my brother was a very gifted athlete. Could have been in the NBA, and was the best player on his JV team at Northridge State. He had one problem, and he devoted his whole life to being in basketball. He was voted the world's greatest deaf athlete. The coach would not allow him to play in the varsity because he was deaf and couldn't hear the signals. Now, if you've devoted your whole life to somebody and somebody tells you can't do it for something you can't control, I would have been devastated. Not my brother. My brother then said, okay, I am going to make myself into a world-class track and field player. And so I would sit with my brother where he watched a 5-minute film of the world champion javelin throw. In 6 or 7 months, my brother became the 7th best javelin thrower in the nation. And his team won the Division II track championship, a hell of a lot better than that basketball coach did at the same school for his team. And when you see somebody go through that, you really get the power of trying. So I feel very blessed that my father and my brother really got the joy of doing things, and it's led me to many things. So I've got to work on a lot of fun transactions that I've closed. I've created many market-leading companies. I've made an impact on the world. Very important to me. I found the love of my life really through that. And over the last 10 years, I've done 60,000 run and walk 60,000 miles. I've circled the globe 2 times. All in the spirit of really trying. And I finished in the top half percent in a fitness competition. And I was the only executive at NRG that did this. And I was competing against people generally half my age. So that to me really instills the whole power of trying and enjoying what you do, because you can always be outcome based, but you got to love what you do, which is really in part why I like being in the green sector, is that at a core, I'm doing something that's meaningful to me, and all the tasks around it then become very meaningful. So trying and doing things is fundamental. So that's what I would respond.
Thank you again to CFO Scott Healy of Forterra for joining us a while back. Our next CFO beginnings story was shared by Tracy Curley, who joined us on episode 834 while CFO of iSpecimen. It was recorded in September of 2022. Part of what we're about to hear was not featured on the original episode. We hope Tracy Curley will grant us some leeway here. We were saying goodbye as she shared this one last item with us. And only later did we realize the significance of what she shared as far as how it reveals the roots of her leadership and being a trailblazer as well as a mother. We have edited the clips in order to fit this format. But here is Tracy Curley.
It's not just one experience, I would have to say, because in my background, I was a non-traditional student And so I had some business experience before I went back to school and finished my degrees. I got my undergraduate in business administration and then my master's of accounting at Kansas State University. But, I was in an office situation doing accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, and so forth before I went back to school. That helped me then when I finished school and I went into public accounting. And I started actually in California, in Monterey, California, with a local accounting firm. And then I moved to Kansas City, where I was with KPMG. I moved with KPMG to Honolulu and then to Boston. So I moved around. And the reason I moved around is I was married at the time to a gentleman who was in the military. And so I was the spouse following along, and KPMG afforded me the ability to do that.
Now, I noticed in your bio, you have a military chapter, or you were at West Point.
So he was 2 years ahead of me. So he was a West Pointer as well. I left to get married. I decided I did not really want to have a military career and left and got married. I'm still in touch with my classmates. I go to class reunions because after 2 years, you build a bond that's, you really can't, you don't want to lose. And so middle of September, I'm going on a weekend with about a dozen of my women classmates for a long weekend, and then another one in November. My class has the distinction of having the highest attrition of women. And we, as we've gotten together as a class of women, have sort of debated and come to the conclusion that, so we were in the third class of women, so the first two classes of women were the women that were really there to prove themselves, that and our class was the first class of just general population women that said, oh, there's women at West Point. Hey, I'm patriotic. Hey, I wouldn't mind having a career in the military. And we were all very successful, legions and either, athletes or leaders in our class, or all three. I played band. I was in the band. I played the flute, and we would go on these summer trips as the band, and we would play. And we went to the academy, and at the time, I'm contemplating having to go to school, get student loans, and pay for my own education. I learned 4 years of free education and then 5-year commitment for a career. How do I sign up? And so we didn't think that we were trailblazers anymore because women were already there. And then we got there and we said, what is this sexism and gender crap? And, so we had the highest attrition rate of women. And then the institution had to step back and say, oh my God, what just happened here? And so they made some massive changes for the next year of women. And now they have women who are in Ranger School. They have over 100 women who have now graduated from Ranger School, which is just phenomenal to me, just phenomenal. So, yeah. So I'm really blessed. I have 2 children. One of them decided to become a CPA, and now he's a partner at KPMG. And so where he, he's working crazy hours, but he loves it. He enjoys it. And, he was never pressured to do that. My other child is an elementary art teacher. And so I'm really blessed that they know how important my career was to me, when I was raising them. And I wouldn't necessarily call it a personal habit, but I do try to respond to things, emails, within 24 hours. I'm not always successful with that, but that does mean sometimes I've got, a laptop in bed at night or early in the morning trying to catch up on emails. And I don't necessarily think I want to admit that, but that is a personal habit that my family is aware of and knows about me.
We should mention that early last year, Tracy Curley was named CEO of iSpecimen, while she still retains her CFO title as well. Our next CFO beginning story is unlike any other we've come across. CFO Svai Sanford of Ronnie Therapeutics was featured on episode number 934. It was recorded in September 2023. Not unlike CFO Curley, his professional life began at KPMG. And just like Scott Healy and Tracy Curley, his is a story that can't be reduced to a bullet on a LinkedIn bio. Here is CFO Svai Sanford.
Well, Jack, I think I might be different in terms of my background than most of the CFO you've spoken to. Many people may not know that I only have a third grade education when I moved to the U.S. Because I was an immigrant. I was a refugee in Thailand, born in Laos, and I escaped from Laos to Thailand, and under the refugee and immigrant rules, spent 5 years in Thailand before I could get to the state. And during that time, I had no education. I had a third grade education from Laos. At the age of 15, I landed in Overland Park, Kansas, a suburb of Kansas City, and enrolled into high school as a freshman. I had broken English. I didn't know true multiplication or division in math, but I managed to get straight A's first year. After that first year in high school, I was living with my sister and her husband and two kids of them. And they asked me if I would consider dropping out of high school so I can start working at the age of 16 to help pay bills. And my sister and my brother-in-law were, my guardian. They raised me from the age of 9 to 16. And I said, I'll do whatever you guys think, will help the family. I was planning to drop out of high school. And the Sanford, my last name today, Jim and Iris Sanford found out I was going to drop out of high school, took me out to dinner. And they said to me, we've seen your report card from the first year. You're too smart to drop out of school. So we'd like to invite you to come live with us. And you don't have to worry about where your next meal is going to come from or pay rent. We will send you to school. Needless to say, that moment changed my life forever. I would not be sitting here speaking with you today as a CFO had I dropped out of high school.
Sorry, did you say their name was Jim and Ivy Sanford? Were they friends of the family or what?
Jim and Iris Sanford. They were our landlord. We were renting an apartment from them. And Jim and Iris had 4 daughters, biological. And here I am, a teenager in their house. All of their kids have already moved out. They were in their late 50s, I would think, at the time. And, who would take in a teenager from a foreign country into their home? They had the biggest hearts. After living with them for a year or so, they asked if I would consider taking their name because my foster dad, Jim, was the only kid in his family. The last name Sanford was gonna, and if no one takes it on, and he asked me if I would want to become a Sanford. And I, obviously couldn't say no. And he was a great storyteller. I wish I have a little bit of what he had. He was a minister at our church, and he always gave the best sermon on Sundays. But the one thing that he said to me that resonate too is that he said that the name has never been in jail, so make sure you you don't mess it up. And I think I made him proud. He passed away about 11 years ago.
Oh, wow. What a lovely story. Unusual. We don't always hear about people like that. Originally, why Kansas? Why did your family land there? Family members.
So my brother-in-law had two older brothers. They escaped during the Vietnam War, and they immigrated to the U.S. and they just happened to land in Kansas City. And so then, the mission for us, I was 9 years old. I had another sister that was maybe 4 years older than me at the time. And then my sister, who's married to my brother-in-law, who was older. The four of us walked across the border from Laos to Thailand. And we had to go through, creeks and stream to avoid the landmine that were planted during the war. And I got to Thailand. It was the first time I saw a car. We hitchhiked, and I remembered my sister, my middle sister, threw up all over me because she got car sick. So that's how we got, the mission to come to the U.S. started then. But it took us a while, 5 years in the refugee camp in Thailand, like 4 years in Thailand and another year in the Philippines before we made it to the U.S. And Kansas City was the destination.
Kansas City was the destination. I was just thinking the same could be said for Tracy Curley. When Tracy Curley lands back in Kansas City, at the time as a military spouse, she saw an opportunity to complete the academic chapter she first initiated years earlier at West Point, and at the same time get her professional life in gear. Interestingly, when Tracy Curley graduates with a bachelor's and a master's degree from Kansas State in 1989, Svai Sanford enters Kansas State 2 years later in 1991. They probably shared the same accounting professors. What's more, when Sanford joins KPMG's Kansas City offices in 1996, he misses Curley just by 2 years, who after 4 years in KPMG's Kansas City office had relocated to Honolulu. Perhaps they worked for the same KPMG partner. It might seem hardly worth speculating on these things, but the point is, Kansas City was the destination and the place where two future finance leaders found their professional footing and got on track. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the holiday. Hello everyone, Jack here. Hope you've been enjoying our recent episodes of CFO Thought Leader. Please know that I don't take for granted this opportunity to serve you. Your time is valuable, and of course, so is the time of our CFO guests. I'll admit to you on certain weeks, I will pinch myself and say, hey, I get to do this for a living. I speak to all these impressive leaders. Undoubtedly, there are more aggressive interviewers out there, some who leave no stone unturned. But our swim lane is for finance leaders only. And those finance leaders have a unique style of leadership, one that is rooted in the burden of trust. In light of this, finance leaders must take great care not to forfeit this trust as they step into the role of being a more expressive leader. And that is what CFO Thought Leader is really about. That's why I try to remind myself week in, week out, how fortunate I am. Still, I need your help. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Email me your comments at jack@cfothoughtleader.com. And please visit CFOThoughtLeader.com. You'll find a listener survey right on the nav bar. As always, thank you for listening.